Picture two fists pressed together, sitting quietly beneath your rib cage, tucked against your back like a pair of silent engineers running a filtration plant that never gets a day off. That is what your kidneys look like. That is what they are. And right now, while you're reading this, while you're breathing, while your heart is beating without you asking it to, those two organs are processing roughly 200 quarts of blood every single day, separating what your body needs from what it needs to get rid of, making split-second chemical decisions at a microscopic level that no machine on Earth has ever fully replicated. You never feel them working. That is the terrifying part, because the kidneys do not send pain signals the way a pulled muscle does or a headache does. They absorb damage silently, they compensate, they adapt, they find workarounds. And then one morning you wake up and your ankles look like they belong to someone twice your size. Your mind feels like it is wrapped in wet cotton. You're exhausted before the day starts, and you're making trips to the bathroom at 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning that are pulling you out of the deep sleep. Your body is desperately trying to reach. Those symptoms are not random. They are your kidneys, finally raising their hand after years of quietly absorbing more than they were built to handle. Here's what makes this conversation urgent. Right now, close to 37 million Americans are living with some degree of kidney dysfunction, and the majority of them have no idea. Research through the National Kidney Foundation has documented this pattern repeatedly. The disease announces itself late, after the damage has already accumulated. After years of dietary habits, chronic dehydration, unmanaged blood pressure, and inflammatory burden have quietly compressed the kidney's filtration capacity from both sides. By the time a blood test shows elevated creatinine, by the time a doctor mentions the word dialysis, the window for easy intervention has already narrowed significantly. But here's what that same research also shows. The kidneys are among the most responsive organs in the human body when given the right conditions. Studies published through Johns Hopkins and peer-reviewed journals indexed by the National Institutes of Health have consistently demonstrated that specific plant compounds, many of which have been sitting in your kitchen spice cabinet for years, can measurably reduce oxidative stress in kidney tissue, lower markers of renal inflammation, and support the filtration machinery that keeps every other organ in your body operational. Today, we are going into 6 of those spices, not folk remedies, not wellness industry marketing, actual compounds with documented biological mechanisms that support kidney function when used correctly. And at the end, I'm going to tell you about the single daily habit that determines whether any of this actually works. The one thing that most people are not doing, and that no spice can compensate for when it is missing. Stay through to the end, because that piece of information is the one that ties everything else together. Let us start. Spice number 6, garlic. Think of your kidney's filtration units, called nephrons, about 1 million of them packed into each kidney, as precision instruments threaded with microscopic capillaries that blood must pass through under carefully regulated pressure. The operative word is carefully. When blood pressure is too high, when vessels are stiff, when inflammation has narrowed the pathways that blood should move through smoothly, those capillaries absorb pressure trauma with every single heartbeat. 100,000 beats a day, every day slamming against filtration tissue that was not designed to absorb that kind of mechanical stress for decades. Garlic's relationship with this problem is not metaphorical. It is biochemical. The sulfur compounds in garlic, particularly allicin and diallyl disulfide, which are released when you crush or cut a fresh clove, trigger a response in the cells lining your blood vessels that increases nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is the molecule that tells smooth muscle tissue to relax. When vascular smooth muscle relaxes, vessels widen. When vessels widen, resistance drops. When resistance drops, blood moves through with less pressure against those delicate nephron capillaries. The kidney tissue downstream of that relaxation receives better oxygenated blood, moves waste more efficiently, and absorbs less structural stress per heartbeat. Research published through the NIH has documented garlic's vascular effects in multiple clinical contexts. Harvard Medical School has connected regular garlic consumption to healthier blood pressure trajectories, which is directly relevant to kidney filtration capacity because the kidneys are both regulated by blood pressure and a primary regulator of it. When that feedback loop is functioning properly, the whole system is more stable. The mistake most people make with garlic eliminates its primary benefit before it has a chance to deliver it. Cooking a clove the moment you cut it destroys allicin before it fully forms. The enzyme that produces allicin, alliinase, needs a few minutes of exposure to oxygen after you crush or chop the clove before the compound reaches its peak concentration. 10 minutes. That is all. Crush it, set it aside, and then add it to whatever you're cooking or consume it directly. The most effective use is 1 to 2 fresh cloves in the morning. Mix with a small amount of raw honey if the flavor is too sharp. Follow with a full glass of water. If you're cooking with it, add it to the pan in the last few minutes rather than the first. And pair garlic-containing meals with a healthy fat, olive oil, avocado, because the fat-soluble compounds absorb better in the presence of dietary fat. Spice number 5, cumin. Your kidneys are not operating in isolation. They are the downstream endpoint of a metabolic system that begins in your gut, runs through your liver, and eventually delivers whatever the first two organs could not fully process to the kidneys for final filtration. When your digestive system is inefficient, when your liver is managing a heavy detoxification load, the kidney's workload increases proportionally. It is a cascade, and cumin works at the beginning of that cascade rather than the end of it. The active compounds in cumin, cuminaldehyde and thymol primarily, have documented antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activity that operates in two connected places. In the digestive system, they support the breakdown and absorption of food in ways that reduce the quantity of unprocessed metabolic byproducts entering the bloodstream. Fewer unprocessed byproducts in the bloodstream means a lighter filtration demand on the kidneys. In the liver, cumin's compounds have been shown in research from King Saud University to support hepatic detoxification pathways, which again reduces the toxin concentration that the kidneys ultimately receive for processing. NIH index research has also shown cumin extract's ability to influence creatinine and urea levels, two of the primary markers that nephrologists use to assess how efficiently the kidneys are clearing waste from the blood. When those markers are elevated, it signals that filtration is falling behind. When dietary and lifestyle interventions bring them back toward normal range, it signals that the filtration system is recovering functional capacity. The freshness of your cumin matters more than most people realize. Pre-ground cumin loses volatile compounds rapidly after processing. Buy whole seeds when possible, grind them yourself just before use, or purchase ground cumin in small quantities and replace it frequently. The method that delivers the most consistent results is steeping half a teaspoon of cumin seeds in hot water for 8 to 10 minutes and drinking it as a morning tea. The warm water acts as a gentle solvent for the active compounds. Adding a small squeeze of lemon increases the antioxidant delivery. A small amount of olive oil in a cumin-dressed salad improves absorption of the fat-soluble components. Spice number 4, cinnamon. When most people hear about blood sugar and kidneys in the same sentence, they think of diabetes. And the connection is real. Diabetic nephropathy is one of the leading causes of kidney failure globally. But the relationship between blood glucose regulation and kidney stress is not limited to people with diagnosed diabetes. In the general population, chronic blood sugar instability, the pattern of spikes and crashes that follows a diet heavy in refined carbohydrates and added sugars, forces the kidneys to manage a filtration environment that is persistently inflammatory, persistently high in glycation byproducts, and persistently taxing on the vascular tissue threading through nephron structures. Cinnamon intervenes in this pattern at the molecular level. Its primary active compound, cinnamaldehyde, along with a family of polyphenols that give the spice its distinctive warm chemistry, have been documented in NIH-indexed research and studies from King Saud University to reduce oxidative stress markers, support healthier glycemic responses to meals, and protect cellular tissue from the kind of inflammatory damage that accumulates when blood sugar management is chronically impaired. Think of what this means for your kidneys. Practically every meal you eat in a day is an event that your blood sugar responds to. If cinnamon's compounds are moderating the inflammatory response to that event, reducing the oxidative burden that the post-meal period deposits into your bloodstream, then your kidneys are receiving cleaner blood to filter across the 12 hours following a cinnamon-containing meal. Multiply that effect across weeks and months of consistent use, and the cumulative reduction in oxidative tissue stress is meaningful. The application here is both simple and specific. Use true Ceylon cinnamon where possible. It has a lower coumarin content than the cassia variety and is safer for regular daily use. Steep a cinnamon stick in hot water for a morning drink rather than adding pre-ground powder that has been sitting in a container for months. Sprinkle fresh ground cinnamon on oatmeal, add it to vegetable soups, incorporate it into roasted sweet potato dishes, pair it with lemon for enhanced antioxidant delivery. A small amount of healthy fat alongside cinnamon-containing meals improves the absorption of its fat-soluble polyphenols. Spice number 3, ginger. There's a category of kidney stress that does not come from what you eat. It comes from inflammation, systemic, low-grade, chronic inflammation that operates in the background of modern life, and that most people have never identified as a specific problem because it does not produce a specific symptom. It produces a general dimming, persistent fatigue that sleep does not fully resolve, a baseline of physical discomfort that becomes normal because it is constant, a cognitive clarity that feels like it was sharper 2 or 3 years ago. This is the environment that chronic systemic inflammation creates, and your kidneys are embedded in it. Inflammatory signaling compounds in the bloodstream reach the kidneys with every filtration cycle. Kidney tissue that is processing a chronically inflamed blood environment is operating under continuous immune system activation, a low-level version of the same cellular stress response that accompanies acute illness, sustained across months and years rather than days. The long-term consequence of that sustained activation is a progressive compression of nephron function that the medical literature describes as inflammatory nephropathy. It is one of the less discussed mechanisms behind age-related kidney decline. Ginger addresses this directly through two bioactive compounds, gingerol, which is most concentrated in raw, fresh ginger, and shogaol, which forms when ginger is dried or cooked. Both compounds have been documented in research published through the NIH and in BMC, complementary medicine and therapies, to suppress specific inflammatory signaling pathways at the cellular level. They are not simply reducing symptoms of inflammation. They are interfering with the molecular communication cascade that produces the inflammatory response in the first place. The practical application is straightforward. Fresh ginger root, grated directly into hot water with a squeeze of lemon and a thin slice left to steep for 5 minutes, produces a morning drink that delivers both gingerol and a secondary wave of shogaol as the heat transforms a portion of the fresh compound. Half a teaspoon of freshly grated ginger is sufficient for daily maintenance. A teaspoon is appropriate during periods of higher stress or after dietary indulgences that you know are inflammatory for your system. Pair ginger with a small amount of olive oil when including it in savory dishes to enhance the absorption of its fat-soluble active compounds. Do not use ginger powder that has been on your shelf for 2 years. It has lost the compound concentration that makes the science relevant. Spice number 2, coriander seeds inside each of your kidneys. Approximately 1 million nephrons are performing a continuous act of biochemical sorting, determining at the molecular level what stays in your blood and what gets removed. The efficiency of that sorting process depends on the health of the membrane structures within the nephrons. And those membrane structures are vulnerable to a specific category of damage that conventional nutrition conversations almost never address: heavy metal accumulation and environmental toxin load. You're exposed to trace levels of heavy metals and environmental pollutants through food, water, air, and consumer products on a daily basis. Your body has mechanisms for processing and eliminating these compounds, but those mechanisms have a capacity that the modern exposure load frequently exceeds. When the clearance system falls behind, these compounds accumulate in soft tissue, including kidney tissue, and generate oxidative damage that is different in character from the dietary oxidative stress that antioxidant spices typically address. It is slower, more persistent, and more structurally damaging because heavy metal accumulation in cellular tissue generates a continuous source of free radical production rather than an episodic one. Coriander seeds contain a set of bioactive compounds, particularly linalool and borneol, that have been documented in journals including Interdisciplinary Toxicology and Journal of Agriculture, Food and Environment to support the body's natural chelation pathways. Chelation refers to the biochemical process of binding metal ions in ways that allow them to be excreted rather than deposited in tissue. Coriander's compounds do not perform this function with the intensity of pharmaceutical chelation agents, but they support the body's endogenous clearance mechanisms in ways that, used consistently over time, measurably reduce the tissue accumulation of specific environmental toxins. NIH Index research has further documented coriander seeds' capacity to reduce key waste markers in blood, support kidney tissue from oxidative damage, and assist the body's natural detoxification architecture. The preparation that delivers the most consistent compound delivery is steeping half a teaspoon of lightly crushed whole coriander seeds, not pre-ground powder, in hot water for 8 minutes. The crushing releases the volatile oils that contain the active compounds. Drinking this in the morning before food or as an afternoon tea positions the compounds in your system during the periods when digestive and liver detoxification activity is most active. Combining coriander seeds with lemon and a small amount of fat amplifies both absorption and the antioxidant component of its overall effect. Spice number 1, turmeric. If every other spice on this list is a support player, turmeric is the anchor. And the reason it earns that position is not because it is more popular or more widely marketed. It is because the research base behind its primary active compound, curcumin, is deeper, broader, and more specifically documented in the context of kidney tissue protection than any other plant compound in the nutritional literature. Curcumin does something that most anti-inflammatory compounds do not do. It crosses the cellular barrier and interferes with inflammatory signaling at the nuclear level. Specifically, it inhibits a regulatory protein called NFKB that functions as a master switch for inflammatory gene expression. When NFKB is activated, it turns on dozens of pro-inflammatory processes simultaneously. When curcumin suppresses NFKB activity, it is not reducing the output of one inflammatory pathway. It is interrupting the command structure that coordinates many of them at once. In kidney tissue, where chronic inflammatory signaling is one of the primary drivers of progressive damage, this mechanism is directly relevant to protecting nephron function. Research published in BMC Nephrology, in the journal Antioxidants, and in multiple NIH index studies has documented curcumin's ability to reduce established markers of kidney damage, lower inflammatory and oxidative stress indicators in patients with chronic kidney conditions, and support overall renal function in controlled clinical settings. These are not observational associations. They are mechanistic findings with documented dose-response relationships. The problem, and this is the single most important practical detail about turmeric, is that curcumin is poorly absorbed on its own. Consumed without any absorption-enhancing cofactor, the majority of curcumin passes through your digestive system without entering your bloodstream in meaningful concentrations. Two cofactors solve this problem effectively. The first is piperine, the active compound in black pepper. As little as a quarter teaspoon of freshly cracked black pepper alongside turmeric increases curcumin's bioavailability by up to 2,000%, according to research published in the journal Planta Medica. The second is fat. Curcumin is fat-soluble, which means it requires dietary fat to cross the intestinal wall and enter circulation. The morning application that delivers the most clinically relevant curcumin concentration is warming a cup of full-fat coconut milk or whole dairy milk, stirring in 1 teaspoon of fresh turmeric powder or a small piece of grated fresh turmeric root, adding a quarter teaspoon of black pepper and a small amount of raw honey if needed for palatability. This is the preparation commonly called golden milk, and the reason it has persisted across centuries of traditional use and is now being studied in clinical settings is that it intuitively solved the bioavailability problem long before the molecular mechanism was understood. The fat is in the milk, the piperine is in the pepper, the compound is in the turmeric. Combined, the absorption is transformation level, different from sprinkling turmeric powder into water and drinking it. Fresh turmeric root, available in most health food stores and many standard grocery stores, contains higher concentrations of curcumin than dried powder and also delivers compounds, termerones, that dried processing reduces significantly. If fresh root is available to you, a 1-inch piece grated into warm liquid delivers a compound profile that powder cannot fully replicate, the overlooked daily habit that determines whether any of this works. Here is the part that most videos about kidney-supporting spices leave out, and it is not a minor detail. It is the foundational condition without which every other intervention loses most of its effectiveness. Water, the volume, the timing, and the consistency of your daily water intake is the variable that determines whether your kidneys can use the anti-inflammatory and antioxidant support these spices provide, or whether they are too burdened by concentrated waste and insufficient flow to respond to it. Your kidneys filter blood and produce urine as the vehicle for waste removal. That vehicle requires water. When you're chronically underhydrated, and most adults are, not severely dehydrated, but consistently operating at a fluid deficit that keeps urine concentrated and filtration sluggish, the compounds your kidneys are trying to excrete, the inflammatory byproducts these spices are reducing, the toxins your liver is clearing and sending downstream, all of it moves through a system that does not have enough solvent to carry it efficiently. The target is half your body weight in ounces of water daily. A 160-pound person needs approximately 80 ounces, roughly 10 cups, spread across the day rather than consumed in a few large amounts. The timing matters. A full 16-ounce glass of water first thing in the morning, before coffee, before food, before anything else, clears the overnight concentration buildup and initiates kidney function with adequate fluid support for the first filtration cycles of the day. A glass of water with each spice preparation. A glass before each main meal. Small amounts consistently throughout the afternoon and evening rather than large volumes that the kidneys cannot process efficiently in a single surge. The color of your urine is your simplest real-time indicator of whether your hydration is supporting or straining your kidney function. Pale straw yellow is the target. Dark amber signals concentration and insufficient fluid. Completely colorless for extended periods can indicate overhydration, which creates its own electrolyte balance issues. Pale straw yellow consistently across the majority of your waking hours tells you that your kidneys are operating in a fluid environment that allows them to use whatever anti-inflammatory support your dietary choices are providing. No spice on this list can substitute for water. Turmeric and black pepper cannot reduce oxidative kidney stress if the filtration system is operating in a chronically concentrated environment. Ginger cannot reduce inflammatory burden in kidney tissue if insufficient fluid is slowing the clearance of the inflammatory byproducts that ginger's compounds are neutralizing. Garlic cannot improve vascular function at the nephron level if dehydration is thickening blood and increasing filtration resistance. Water is not a supplement to the spice protocol. It is the medium in which the spice protocol operates. Putting it together, what consistent support looks like. The pattern that research supports and that clinical nutritionists working in kidney health consistently recommend is one of daily, consistent, low-intensity support rather than periodic intensive interventions. Your kidneys are not a drain that needs periodic chemical flushing. They are a continuous biological system that responds to the cumulative quality of the environment they operate in. Morning: 16 ounces of water immediately upon waking. A cup of cumin or coriander seed tea with lemon. 1 to 2 cloves of crushed fresh garlic rested for 10 minutes after crushing with honey and water or incorporated into breakfast. Golden milk or turmeric pepper fat preparation if mornings allow. Throughout the day, consistent water intake across the hours, not concentrated in 1 or 2 large volumes. Fresh ginger added to lunch preparations, grated into dressings, steeped into afternoon tea, incorporated into soups or grain bowls. Cinnamon on oatmeal in afternoon tea, in roasted vegetable preparations at dinner. Across weeks, the research timelines are realistic and worth knowing before you begin. Urine clarity improvements from adequate hydration occur within the first week. Reductions in swelling and fluid retention, when they are present, typically become noticeable within 2 to 3 weeks of consistent anti-inflammatory dietary change. Laboratory markers, creatinine, urea, GFR, are slower to move and require 6 to 8 weeks of consistent support before changes are likely to appear on a blood panel. This is not failure. This is the timeline of biological adaptation in a system that accumulates damage slowly and recovers on a similarly measured schedule. Your kidneys have been working for you without acknowledgement every day of your life. The least demanding thing you can give them is the consistent daily environment they need to keep doing that work. Clean hydration, reduced inflammatory burden, adequate antioxidant support from foods whose compounds have been documented to matter in peer-reviewed research. Not a cure, not a miracle. A consistent daily practice that compounds over time into a meaningful improvement in the conditions under which your filtration system operates. The spices are in your kitchen, the water is in your tap, the habit is a decision you can make starting with the next glass you drink. That is the complete picture. 6 spices, 1 non-negotiable foundation, and a timeline that is honest about when you will begin to notice the difference. If this gave you something actionable, drop a comment below with which spice you're starting with. And if you found this valuable, share it with someone whose kidneys have been silently absorbing more than they should.